Yes, yes. So we rolling now. Dr. Eddie Moore Jr., the Privilege Institute, kicking off Coffee with the Founder with my friend, my homeboy, Jasiri X. Jasiri X, man, thank you for joining us, man. It's good to see you.
Oh, thank you for having me, man. It's good to interact with you as always.
Yeah, so I think one thing I want to do is just really introduce our people to the people that have been a part of the White Privilege Conference. I know they see you a lot on the stage and in your workshops, but I think this is an opportunity. We want to use this opportunity as a way to really let the people know who are the people that have been really rolling with us, the White Privilege Conference, the Privilege Institute, and the work that they're doing, not only in the way that they see them at the conference, but when they leave the conference. It's important for people to know that you're doing stuff day to day, every day as well. So let's start with, who is Jasiri X, bro? Can you just tell the folks who you are, what it is you do, and how do you talk about that when you introduce yourself to folks, or folks want to know a little bit about you? That's one of the things I want to start with. Who is Jasiri X?
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for all the great work that you do with the Privilege Institute. I would say, I'm an activist, I'm an artist. I'm somebody, I'm a human being who sees that there's issues in the world that I would like to change to make the world a better place for myself, for my family. And so I would say start there. One of the things that, I started on this path was, one of the founding members of an organization called One Hood, that started in Pittsburgh around 2006. And this was a response to the violence in our community. And it was a group of us, Black men who were, we were like the younger activists. We're part of the hip hop generation. And so we saw things differently than some of the established organizations. And we wanted to, use hip hop and use, the culture as a way to bring communities together in Pittsburgh and stop the violence. So we started, One Hood. Early on, we kind of saw that, it was a need not only to deal with the violence in our community, but also to be like advocates, particularly for young Black people in Pittsburgh. A lot of people don't know. Well, I'm based in Pittsburgh, and a lot of people don't know that Pittsburgh, we have the poorest working class Black community in the country. It's a very segregated place. And so for us, it was, coming together, and, the concept of One Hood was that, all of us are dealing with, in all these different communities, poverty, violence, police brutality, lack of affordable housing. And oftentimes we take our frustrations out on one another, and we felt like, if we came together in unity, we could actually deal with the structural racism, the institutional racism, the real issues that's keeping our community in the state that they're in. And so around 2010, we started One Hood Media, which was really, about giving our youth a platform to tell our own stories. You know what I'm saying? When the media depicts us, particularly as young Black men, oftentimes is 99% negative, or it's that, one singular story. And so we saw the arrival of social media as a way that we could take our stories and take our talents and our gifts directly out to our community. And around the same time, 2010, I did a hip hop song. Really, 2006, I did a song called Free to Gina 6, right around the time as we started One Hood, that ended up being played all over the country and became a theme song to the Gina 6 movement. And, that was a victory for our community in terms of organizing. These were 6 young Black men who were, arrested for a high school fight. And one of them was given 10 years in prison. And so the organizing around that actually, led to those men getting out of jail, led to the charges being dropped. And, my song was like the theme song to that movement. It was really what encouraged me to continue rapping and continue doing music. And in 2010, I did a song called What If the Tea Party Was Black, that went viral, that was based on an article that Tim Wise wrote called Imagine If the Tea Party Was Black. And that enabled me to like leave my job and become a full-time artist. So since 2010, I've been a full-time hip hop artist doing conscious music. Most of my topics are around like racism and white supremacy, you know, running this organization, One Hood Media, which I've been doing. You know, I was creative director, but I've been CEO since 2018.
Yeah, lots of stuff. I remember at White Privilege, the song you brought to the stage when our folks first learned about you was Trayvon.
Absolutely.
And so I wanted you to just talk a little bit about how that song came about, because I think America's memory is very short when it comes to those kinds of issues. And also I wanted you to talk a little bit about my shirt, because one of my son's favorite songs is one of your relatively new songs, The Whitest House. And I wanted, to hear a little bit about just how does a song come to fruition? You mentioned Gina Six, you mentioned the Tea Party and Tim Wise. So Trayvon, Whitest House, it seems like there's a news story, but how does an artist like yourself bring the content alive to songs like that?
So for me, you know, Trayvon, you know, I remember, you know, somebody shoot me the article via Twitter, and it was just something that hit me. At the same time that I found out about Trayvon, I was actually on my way for the first time to speak and perform at a music and film festival called South by Southwest. So this was like a really big deal, because this is a big opportunity, you know, all of the major, you know, Jay-Z, Nas, like Eminem, like Lil Wayne, like all these people that they're performing. And so, but because I had learned about what happened with Trayvon, it was something that I couldn't shake. And for me, it was like, I was used to police killing us, but like now you're telling me like just some random white guy can just shoot a young black man down, and the police just give him his gun back and send him on his way. And then we found out, at the time I was blogging for a website called Black Youth Project. And I remember writing a blog about, you know, we had found out that it was George Zimmerman who had a criminal record and all of these different things. And the police told him not to approach Trayvon, and he did anyway. And so, you know, I just remember being there, and it was like, I couldn't enjoy myself because of what I was feeling. And so, I wrote the song at South by Southwest really as a way to, you know, let my own emotions out, you know what I mean? And, I remember I met an artist down there named Mirage. I recorded it in his closet. I recorded the song that you hear, if you ever heard Trayvon, I was recording that brother Mirage's closet, a brother I met that was a hip hop artist based in Austin. And then we shot the video in Austin, Texas, myself and Paradise Gray. People know Paradise, he was part of a rap group in the late 80s, early 90s called X Clan. And I remember calling the organization Color of Change, because I wanted the video to have some connection with the movement to arrest George Zimmerman. At this time, George Zimmerman wasn't even arrested. And I remember Color of Change, we kind of went back and forth, me and brother Rashad Robinson, a brilliant, to me, one of our most brilliant organizers and spokespeople for our community. And, we ended up saying like, all right, we're going to do this. And I remember dropping the song, dropping the video, and then it just went everywhere. And it was another, after the Gina Six, that was the next song that I had that was played all over the country. And, shout out to Kanye and Jay-Z, because I used the beat that they did for their album, Watch the Throne, No Church for the Wild. I used that beat, and Frank Ocean, and, the rest was history. And I remember you hit me up on Facebook and telling me about the White Privilege Conference and coming. I remember thinking like, I thought you was white. I just didn't. I don't know if I didn't look at the picture. I was like, oh, it's, Dr. Eddie, you know what I mean? And I remember when I met you, I was like, oh, this a brother running this? Like, and I just remember really being proud of, because I think it was Albuquerque, New Mexico. And, really, what the White Privilege Conference did for me was it really introduced me to a lot of academics who I didn't know were using my videos and music in their classrooms. Dr. Michael Benitez, Brother Amir, you know what I'm saying? A lot of good folks, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm appreciative that I got that I answered that Facebook message. I've been at you know, every white privilege conference since, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's a blessing.
Yeah, we appreciate that, man. It's been a fun ride, and I'm looking for the next 20.
Yes.
If we can do it. But absolutely. I was wondering, like, did you grow up saying, I want to be a rapper, right? Like, who was this guy at 8 years old, 9 years old?
It's funny, I didn't. I mean, but I grew up, like, wanting to make a difference. I mean, I grew up socially conscious. I mean, you know, my mother named me Jasiri. It's a Swahili name that means brave warrior. And so, you know, my mother raised us, you know, with Malcolm and Martin and, you know, Ella Baker and, you know, Fannie Lou Hamer. And so I remember wanting to do something to help my community and make a change. But, you know, I really became a rapper. You know, my life really changed when my mother moved us from the south side of Chicago to a suburb of Pittsburgh called Monroeville, Pennsylvania. And, you know, my mother was raising me conscious, but I was in an all-Black environment. I really didn't get it until I got to Monroeville, and I got to this high school that was 95% or 99% white, and dealt with racism to my face, was called a nigga, was called out my name, was fighting in school and getting suspended. And that's when it hit me like, oh, all these things my mother told me about, you know, and that's kind of how I became an activist at Gateway High School, starting a Black club called Our Cultures, getting to school to teach a Black history class. And, you know, I became a rapper there just because my best friend at the time got some turntables for Christmas and was like, you know, I'm gonna be the DJ, you be the rapper. And I wrote a rap and it was terrible, but it was like therapeutic for me because I was able to write about the issues and things that I was dealing with and going through at the time. And, you know, people encouraged, even when I was not good, you know, I was encouraged by other people to continue. And so it was a blessing to get that encouragement. And then eventually I got good enough into, you know, now that's what I do for a living. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you bring up some other things that I think are often missed about the industry, you know, particularly folks who are doing it in the way you're doing. I mean, you said writing several times in this interview, and I just feel like people lose sight of the talent that musicians, rap musicians particularly, have when they're creating lyrics, they're memorizing lyrics,
yeah.
They're setting them to beats, they're figuring out the beats. I mean, I was wondering, when did you feel like, okay, I got this thing down? And what do you think is the most overlooked talent, most mischaracterization that often is laid upon the rapper that you wish people would know? Because right now, I just love the fact that you say writing.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily the next word people would say is rapper.
Yeah. I mean, well, a couple of things, man. I think for me, I started to come into my own when I started, you know, kind of, you know, I had started, it was a point where my producer quit. Like, he was like, I'm done with hip hop. You know what I'm saying? And we had I was in a group. We actually, you know, got a contract from Motown. We decided not to sign it. We had some like internal turmoil. I don't know if I ever told this story. We had some internal turmoil, and my producer quit. And so I ended up starting to do like spoken word because I didn't have I didn't have no beats, you know what I'm saying? And so, but it was right around when, like, remember when Def Poetry Jam was taking off? And so the spoken word scene was hyping. So I took my raps to spoken word, but what I learned was like, it's a very different way you write for spoken word than actually for a rap. And I got around a lot of super talented spoken word artists, you know, and Pittsburgh, I mean, you know, we had Vanessa German, Nate James, you know, KL. We had like these amazing artists, and I was able to just build with them and be in community with them and learn from them and perform with them. And I felt like that's when I started. I remember I did a spoken word called "You Don't Really Want Justice," and I remember I would perform it, and people would be like, "Yo," like, you know, just the response that I got. You know, I did a spoken word where I was like, if Martin Luther King Jr. came back today. And like, people was really feeling it. And so when I ended up going back to rap, I feel like that experience gave me a base. So, you know, when I wrote Free the Gina 6 to a beat that I found online from Just Blaze. I felt like at that point, I had the ability to really tell a story well and to write well and to convey emotion, because I really learned that from being in community with these spoken word artists that were really powerfully presenting a lot of their works. And so when the Gina 6 hit, I was like, okay, obviously I have something that can connect beyond myself if this song is being played all over the country. And then after that, it was really on, But I would say to your answer, man, I think sometimes when people think rap, they don't really think about the complexity that goes into like some of the songs. Like, it was just a big thing this weekend with DJ Premier and the RZA, like, and they were like playing their songs and their catalogs. And DJ Premier ended with a song called I Gave You Power by Nas. To me, which might be one of the greatest concept records in hip hop history, where Nas raps from the perspective of a gun. And I don't think like people understand like how difficult that it not, Nas did told a story backwards in one of his rhymes. Tells the whole story backward. Like, I don't think people understand like how difficult that is to conceive and then do in a way where it's not corny, like it's not cliche, it's like really, really good. So I think like, seeing Kendrick Lamar get a Pulitzer Prize for his album, well deserved, for his album Damn, I think it's starting to get people to understand that, okay, it takes real talent and real ingenuity to do some of the music. Now, does it take a lot of stuff to kind of do the bounce, shake it? Nah, not really. I mean, but that's fun. I mean, we need that too, particularly now. You know what I mean? We need that too. But I think when you get into like some of the different creations, to me, I compare that to when I hear, I look at the songs that I've done, and I'm inspired when I hear, Bob Dylan talking about Hurricane Carter. You know what I'm saying? I feel like put me in that vein. Not to say I'm Bob Dylan, but that this is a man that did a song about a particular issue at the time. And that's what I did, and did it in a way where it helped to generate and help to bring light to this matter. And then we had Hurricane Carter, get out of prison. I feel like that's the type of vein that I want to be seen as an artist.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, man. Malcolm Gladwell did the book Outliers, which I'm sure you're familiar with, where he talks about 10,000 hours, right? Like, I just wonder, when did you feel like, okay, I'm a professional now? Like, I got my hours in.
So I did a series called This Week with JasiriX from, I want to say, about 2008 to maybe 2012, like maybe right before Trayvon, maybe 2011. Actually, when I did What If the Tea Party Was Black, that was like the last season. So maybe 2 years. So for 2 years, I was doing a rap every week, rapping about the news. And so like, it made me a really, really, and I had to do it. It had to be out at a certain time every week. If I was late, people would be hitting me up. Yo, where's This Week with JasiriX? Like, where's our episode? And so to me, after that, I felt like, man, so I would say that was one part of it. And then there was another part, maybe about 3 years ago, where I was able to work with a hip hop artist named Rhymefest, who a lot of people maybe don't know him, but he co-wrote Glory with Common. He co-wrote Jesus Walks with Kanye West. He's written on almost all of Kanye West's projects. We came together, we did a album for a week where he came to my house, stayed here for a week, and we wrote every day. And to me, that process, like, he taught me about the importance of like every line having meaning and every ended and having an impact. And so I remember after I was with him, I wrote a song that ended up being, played again, ended up being played nationally. I ended up, performing it on Sway in the Morning, which is a national radio show, particularly around hip hop. And so I feel like when I wrote that song, and when I kind of almost, that was like a boot camp to even make me a more proficient and profound writer now. So I feel like now, you give me a beat, and if the beat is good, I can kind of go in and zone in and make something good.
Yeah. Well, I want to come back to the future of JasiriX, but I think I remember what I appreciate about you and your work is your classroom delivery that gets sometimes underestimated. Is not only are you a stage performer, but you go into the classroom and deliver knowledge. And I'll never forget you saying in one of your presentations, I mean, who's gonna buy a rap about making good grades and going to school on time? You know, just talking about how these contracts for many of these big kind of gangster rappers are tied to these kind of caricatures. So I think even to become social conscious or a positive rapper, I mean, it's not easy to explore white supremacy.
True.
So I want to just ask you a little bit about that. Like, how does your work, why did you decide, how do you continue to decide about embedding some of the toughest issues of social justice around white supremacy, white privilege, and other forms of oppression?
Well, like I said, I mean, I think it goes back to my experience, man. You know, coming from an all-Black environment into Monroeville and really seeing, you know, how differently, you know, even I was treated as even how I was treated as a Black student who graduated with honors. You know what I'm saying? It wasn't, you know, I could be intelligent, I could be good. You know, my mother always tell me like, you got to work twice as hard. And you know, like from a justice perspective, you're like, well, why? Like, why should I have to work twice as hard as somebody else to get the same results? You know what I'm saying? And so for me, it was really allowed me to analyze, like, well, what is, you know, just like we're all human beings, like, why are certain people, you know, treated differently? And so, like I said, it was something that I started to talk about, you know, when I started this week with Jasiri X, it was when Obama was running for office. And when you saw a lot of the racism and, you know, the soccer moms and Joe Sixpack and all of this coded language that's really talking about white people, and, you know, Obama's a Muslim and he's this scary Black man and he's the Antichrist. And it was like, well, wait a second. This is just straight up racism. You know what I'm saying? This is just straight up white supremacy. And so because I'm a hip hop artist, I wanted to rap about it. You know what I'm saying? And so if you go back and look at when I talked about, you know, this week with Jasiri X, and I was rapping during the Obama, the rise of Obama, a lot of it was about like the racist and defending him against the racist attacks that he had. And then, you know, when I did What If the Tea Party Was Black, that was really the first video that I got positive and negative comments. You know what I'm saying? It was like, you know, so many, it was a comment where somebody was like, well, what if you were Black? You know, because I'm a light-skinned, you know, Black person, and you know what I mean? Like, and so it was so much, I had to actually make a video explaining why I did the song. And so it was like, okay, well, obviously I touched a nerve when I began to talk about these issues. And so for me, it's really about, to me, it's like a simple thing because we deal with like race is like that, you know, well, you can call it elephant in the room, but it's really like that, almost like that invisible thing that covers everything. And the fact that no one wants to talk about it, to me, is like, well, that's why we continue to be in these same conditions over and over again, because we're unwilling to address it, or we want to, you know, say white people real quietly instead of saying like, nah, these are some issues that we need to address. You know, I had a song called The Babies where I say like, I never heard him say or call a baby a meth child. White supremacy means always having the best child. So we had crack babies, right? But I never heard in any scenario them talking about a baby coming out addicted to methamphetamines, an opiate baby. Like we're realizing like that now. Of course, we're seeing that these. I mean, we always knew that they were affecting white people, but now it's coming to mainstream that white people are super being affected by the opioid crisis. But the way it's being framed is much different. And so I just decided, okay, well, I'm a rapper. I'm a rap about how these issues are being formulated.
Well, listen, since you said white people, I want to go there with this COVID-19, because I'm wondering how you're dealing with quarantine in general, just you, the family. How are you doing? And then secondly, as we're seeing these numbers roll out across the states, across the nation, and how this pandemic is impacting communities of color, specifically Black communities, differently. I mean, what's some of your thoughts around what's happening in reference to this pandemic and quarantine?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, like I'm an introvert, so I really don't mind being in the house. Like I'm cool with being in the house. I'm a homebody, so I'm not. It's not that big of an issue to me. And I'm privileged. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I have a nice home. I have access to Wi-Fi, I have access to food, and I have the ability to work from home. So I just understanding that like I'm in a privileged position where a lot of folks, aren't able to do that. You know what I'm saying? And so it's actually for me giving me more time to, I'm back on my workout. And really, I think it's caused me to even think about, when you're on a road, you're not eating the best, you kind of rolling, you're not sleeping the best, you kind of like, it's that grind. And so it allowed me to kind of just slow down, start eating healthier, start getting back working out. I got a bike, I'm riding my bike, it's almost a thing where like, you're not supposed to be outside, now you want to be outside, you know what I'm saying? So I'm like, I'm riding my bike, I live next to a park. And so it's been, it's been something that has actually kind of been refreshing for me on one hand, but on the other hand, like you said, I mean, I'm seeing, about maybe maybe about a month ago now, well, I would say maybe 2 to 3 weeks ago, when people first, they started to have like a lot of town halls in Pittsburgh around COVID-19, and there was like no Black representation on none of them. And so, I started talking with a good friend of mine about like, yo, man, like we need to do our own thing. And so One Hood connected with another organization. The only video I saw that was speaking to our community about COVID was a brother based in Pittsburgh named Dr. Jamil Bey, who has an organization called Urban Kind Institute. And so we collectively came together and we did a town hall last week called What Black Pittsburgh Needs to Know About COVID-19. And, as of today, we have like over 7,000 people tuned in and listened to what we had to say. We had, over 300 people, like, I think was the max, was like watching it live. And so we have we're going to do it every week and bring on different guests. Like this week, last week we had on a doctor, from the University of Pittsburgh to kind of just talk about it from a medical perspective. And we wanted to debunk a lot of myths. There's a lot of myths in our community about if you have melanin, you can't get it. You just drink hot water every 15 minutes. We wanted to say like, nah, we really have to take it seriously and, wear masks and practice social distancing and all of those things. And so we have like some government officials on coming this week to talk about like, what the government is doing, like, how our community is going to be impacted. And so like everything, I mean, we always say like when white America catches a cold, Black America gets the flu. And so it wasn't surprising, it's saddening, but it wasn't surprising to see how many Black people are being affected by COVID-19, because it's really not necessarily reflective of the virus, but reflective of the structural racism that we deal with. The fact that when we go to the hospital, a lot of times we're not treated with the same care and love. The fact that a lot of us are, now these essential frontline workers, a lot of those jobs that we have, particularly in the Pittsburgh area. And, these big corporations weren't even trying to protect these quote unquote essential workers. We have to ride public transportation, all these things that could lead to, catching the virus, is what we're experiencing, man. So we're in Pittsburgh, really taking it upon ourselves to like get this information directly to our people in our community.
Yeah, I think one other thing that has come up for me, and I'm wondering how you're thinking about this, is the Asian Pacific Islander community in reference to how they've been almost swept into, pulled into this kind of pandemic scene and being impacted in a way that is just outright white supremacy, racism, right, so on and so forth. And then I think even some of what we're seeing with some of the Latinx community. So I'm wondering, are you seeing a call for collaboration in reference to just communities of color in general? Because it seems like white is getting better in reference to treatment, access, opportunities, information, and people of color are getting it worse, whether it's the conditions, the impact, or the kind of social issues that come out of this, where people are assigning this pandemic to populations of people, where we're going to see folks, I think, coming out of this have a different kind of impact long term. So just wondering what you're seeing there. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I remember, the last thing I did, ironically, was kind of a remnant of the white privilege conference. The last place I went before, we had to kind of lock down was Grand Rapids. And I spoke at a high school, and, it was a multiracial high school. And I talked about, the New York, I want to say it was the Post Daily News, had a photograph about the article of the first person in New York that died of corona. And, even though this person was a white woman in Manhattan, they showed the picture of an Asian man from Queens. And it was like, this is kind of how the media does. And we see, Trump talking about the China virus, and, really putting, Asians' lives in danger, because now you see an Asian person and, oh, you're to blame. It's your fault that we're locked up. There's this, the scapegoat mentality that white supremacists do. Like, you don't got a job. It's that immigrant's fault. You don't got, somebody, it's your neighborhood is dirty. Oh, that's some black people's fault. You know what I'm saying? Now it's like, oh, you're locked down. Oh, the reason we got this virus is these Chinese people's fault. And now that violence is directed toward them. And so I've seen some, Asian Pacific organizations kind of coming together with Black organizations that kind of have virtual town halls and have conversations. We work with an organization based in LA called Revolve Impact, that did a big release about, like, supporting, our Asian brothers and sisters and standing up, cross community against that type of xenophobia and those type of attacks on those communities. I think this is where, we really have to come together. And, it happened in Pittsburgh, really, particularly because we had, in 2018, the killing of Antoine Rose II, who was a 17-year-old unarmed Black man. And then a few months later, we had the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, the largest massacre of Jewish people in the history of the United States. And it really began a conversation with our community and the Jewish community around, how can we really become, stronger allies? What are some of the barriers that's kind of keeping us apart? And how do we come together for an authentic relationship and support? And I think those same conversations, we're having now with our Asian communities, we're having with our Latinx communities. And it's just important that, and this is why, the Privilege Institute and the White Privilege Conference is important, because it allows us to come together and collectively understand how, white supremacy really hurts all of us. White supremacy, look how, look at the result of people voting for a president because he's racist. Like, we literally, these white folks went out and voted for a president because he's racist. And now you have a man in charge who is mismanaging a global pandemic, and thousands of people are dying, and it might go up to hundreds of thousands of people dead. This is how, so white supremacy and white privilege isn't even just about its effect on people of color, it's effect on white people too. Like, come on, man. Like, we elected a dumb reality TV star because he was able to appeal to the most racist instincts in the majority of white people, And so I hope we're learning, and I hope as we go along, we learn,
Yeah, well, as you know, the White Privilege Conference, the Privilege Institute, we're looking at not one person, but one issue, and that's how this supremacy, this white supremacy, this white privilege, this oppressive network is not just this one person. Because I think, what's alarming to me is not just the response from the leader, but you got constituents around him, even constituents of color.
Yeah.
Participating in this. And I think this is one of the things I want to
crazy.
Ask you about.
I would say those people of color, they white supremacists too. Well, that's another thing. Just because you a person of color don't mean you can't practice white supremacy.
I think this is where, as we look at, and I want to extend this invite publicly right now, the next 10 years of Jasiri X at the White Privilege Conference. What can we anticipate from you? I mean, what is it that you see for yourself in your work, One Hood, if we look at over the next decade?
Man, I mean, hopefully grow it. I mean, you know, for me, I'm working on a couple of projects now. One specifically about, you know, Pittsburgh and my Pittsburgh community, and one is actually dedicated to Paul Robeson, and it's a soundtrack to his first film called Body and Soul. And so I hope to continue to grow as an artist. I hope to, you know, write a book. I think maybe after I complete these two projects, I'm gonna look at a book. And I have a couple of different ideas. You know, my good friend is, you know, Bakari Katwana, who's an amazing author. He just did the book with Rakim. He just did another new book about democracy. And so, you know, he's kind of pointing me in that direction. For One Hood, I mean, we hope to expand. I mean, we hope to, as we continue to build in Pittsburgh, really look at, you know, the model and concept of One Hood in some different areas. And that's the cool thing about the White Privilege Conference, is because it's gone to all of these different places, I've been able to make connections with folks in a lot of these different cities and towns. And so, you know, for me, it's about looking and saying, okay, can we take the model of One Hood and expand it to a different place in a different city? You know, can we go international? What does that look like? And so I think those are the things that we have in mind. You know, I have, you know, some more rhymes in me, and you know, and then, you know, hopefully I got some other stuff to give and other stuff to share.
Yeah, we appreciate all that you've been able to bring to us in the past, and we definitely miss seeing you this year, but we're ready to roll for next year, and like I said, the next 10 years. And so what I was gonna ask you to close out with is just a little fun. You know, we've had a little work here, a little serious work, but can you just tell me what you're streaming? Give me some streaming suggestions, because I got a little extra time on my hand. So is there something streaming wise that you're learning from, and something that allows you to just disconnect?
Man, you know, I try to, you know, look at and learn, you know, from stuff. You know, when I'm streaming, I stream a lot of like interviews, a lot of podcasts, interviews. And so I think those, you know, I would like, if you're interested in hip hop, you know, and hip hop history particularly, you know, it was a podcaster that really introduced me to podcasts named Combat Jack. And the Combat Jack show and his interviews were really like movies. You know, and unfortunately, you know, he passed away a few years ago from cancer, but his content is still available online. And so, you know, fascinating interviews with some of these. Or he did an interview with Warren G, and I'm thinking Warren G is just a small player in hip hop, and just to find out how extensive his life, it was just fascinating. And so, definitely, like, if you got time, you like podcasts, I would say go listen to the Combat Jack show. It's a phenomenal treasure trove of information in hip hop history. And then to disconnect, I mean, you know, I'm a movie buff, I'm a show buff. I mean, I finished Ozark last night. You know, that was a crazy show on Netflix. You know, if you got HBO Go, it's a good time to go back and watch The Wire. Yeah. You know, one of the greatest shows in television. I might have to go back and rewatch that as a phenomenal show. And you know, my favorite show, you know, like I tend to I like realism. I know I don't know if it's a disconnect for me. I always tell people about this show. My favorite show on Netflix is called Gomorrah, and it's an Italian show, so you have to read it unless you can speak Italian. You know what I'm saying? If you can speak Italian, but it's about, you know, it's kind of like The Wire in Italy, and it shows like one of the things that is fascinating to me about the show is, you know, it's about kind of like the mafia and how it organizes in Italy, but it's basically people trying to make sense of poverty and the poverty they're in. They're projects, housing projects over there. And so it causes you to see it's not a black thing. It's not like, oh, you're doing that because you're black. No, you know, we're trying to deal with this structural racism and institutionalized racism and classism that exists when you bring capitalism to the table. And I know that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
And so if you don't mind like reading a TV show, it's violent, you know, I'm gonna just tell you straight up, you know, but it's a show that I thought was really, really fascinating because it's not glamorous. And, you know, if you're familiar with that lifestyle, it's not glamorous. You know, I don't care. You know, I know some of the rap songs make it like that, but it's not. Anybody that participates in this lifestyle is not glamorous. And so I like when, you know, shows can realistically depict, you know, how dangerous and how stressful, how negative that life can be. And it's a good show. It's entertaining. You know what I mean? So Gomorrah, if you're down with it.
Yeah, and what about your kids, man? What do you watch with them? I mean, is there something, I mean, I forget how old they are, but what is it that you watch with them lately?
We just watched, you know, we got Disney Plus, and Disney Plus has a movie called Onward, where I guess, you know, because of Corona, they was like, yo, we just going to throw this on Disney Plus. And so we just had the family movie like last night. We watched Onward. It was dope. You know, it was a really like kind of spiritual movie. Although it was like cartoons and it was like drama and stuff. And so, yeah, you know, we be on that Disney Plus, you know what I'm saying? Like, so if you have that, that's a great movie to watch with the family, you know what I'm saying? So if you haven't seen Onward, I recommend it.
Well, DreamWorks has cost me $40 already because my baby girl, for 2 days, I think I watched Trolls 2 9 times. I don't know if that's a black dad record, but I'm working on 9 more times the next 48 hours. So
my daughter wanted to watch that too, and so that's what I said, well, look, the Disney Plus one is already like, we already got Disney Plus. We gonna watch this free one first before we got to pay for the $20 troll movie. You know what I mean? Yeah. So
well, that's my cry. That's my plea to any kind of Disney exec that may be listening in. I think $20 is not a price that's accessible to everybody. I mean, I can do it, but I wonder about those families who could benefit from, like you said, a movie like, you know, Onward, or even Trolls 2, which is kind of fun. I think kids need a laugh, a disconnect. Families need that too. And it feels like it's just for those of us who can do it when you look at the pricing structure. But that's a whole another conversation.
That's the capitalist podcast, the Down with Capitalist.
Yes. I was going to give you Top Boy.
Top Boy's good.
Yes. Okay, great. You're in on that. Right. Yeah. So that was one of my favorite that I kind of stumbled on just because The Wire is kind of my kind of venue. So
I did watch that. I was impressed by it.
Yeah. So listen, bro, man, I appreciate your time. Coffee with the Founder, Eddie Moore Jr., the White Privilege Conference, the Privilege Institute. We're going to be bringing you these kinds of interviews, these kinds of conversations from these kinds of folks who are not just doing it on the big stage day to day, every day, but are in neighborhoods, communities doing the work. And there's no greater way to kick it off than Jasiri X, bro. I appreciate you. I respect you. I love you, bro. And I'm proud of you, man, for grinding, not only on the stage, but in the neighborhood.
Absolutely, man. I'm looking forward to when we can come outside and we can connect again, brother. So hit me up.
All right, bro. Peace, love, soul, my brother. Take care.
My hood.
Yes.